Welcome to the Blonde Runner podcast with Coach Laura Erickson, where she shares her healthy living tips as a running and triathlon coach and mother of 4.
Hello friends, Coach Laura Erickson with BlondeRunner.com, and I'm super excited to talk to you about the Ogden Marathon today. I have been a long-time ambassador for them, and there's a reason why. This is a great race. It's been around for over 20 years. Any race that's been around for that long is definitely a good race. There's a lot of history with this race. The Goal Foundation puts it on, and they started with, of course, the Olympics. The Olympic Winter Games in 2002 ended up getting the bid for the Ogden Marathon. They were involved in Xterra as well, so they put on amazing events. They've taken this race from a smaller race to a much larger world-class race, in my opinion. This Ogden Marathon has been voted best running event in Utah by Salt Lake City Weekly. It's also one of the top 10 marathons in the world, according to Runner's World. And I can tell you why. It's one of the best courses for beginners because of the beautiful scenery. It's also, the home to a lot of elite athletes love to do this race too. So I love that about this race. So particularly wonderful race. This race is in Utah. It's the third week in May annually. So if you're looking for a great race, this is definitely a good one. They also offer a winter running circuit, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. So I really just wanted to dig deep into the questions people ask a lot about marathons. I've been coaching for, over 25 years, so a long time here with running, and these are common questions that I get, especially with marathon training. So the first one I want to talk about is how are you ready for the race? How are you ready to do a marathon, I guess is the question. So for me, when people ask me, gosh, I want to do a marathon, am I capable of this? A lot of people ask. I always like to ask, well, what is your race history? Have you done some 5Ks? Have you done some 10Ks? What about a half marathon? I think it's important to build up, to the race. If you're a very beginner, maybe you're just starting out running, give it a year of running to see if you want to experience that. And I would say do the shorter races to see if you want to take on a marathon distance. But maybe you've been running for a while. You've done some of these smaller races and you're thinking, okay, how, can I do this? I would give yourself 6 to 9 months, decide, hey, I want to do a marathon. And then I would do that build for a beginner for that. A lot of people ask me, how long does it take to train for a marathon? And I think that answer really depends on you and your history and how much running you've done. But for most people, I would give it anywhere from 16 to 20 weeks. So 4 or 5 months of good training. If you're a fairly experienced runner, or maybe you've done some marathons, but you really want to take it to the next level, give yourself at least 12 weeks of really good training. This race, particularly from this Saturday, it's 12 weeks away from this Saturday. So February 26th, it's 2/22 of 22 today, which is kind of lucky. Anyway, so, and I would say at this point, having it 12 weeks away, are you able to do a 10K without stopping? Like 6 miles running without stopping, or even a 60 to 90 minute run without stopping? Then you can probably get through and do a marathon in that time. So it isn't totally out of the picture to be able to do it from, now. So, and one thing I really like about this race too is if you sign up for the marathon, let's say, and you're not quite ready, you didn't quite get the mileage in you need, you can drop down to the half. And this year they've offered a 12K distance, which I really love. I come from collegiate background and I was a 5,000 meter runner, which is a 5K, and they also have a 5K, which is really nice. So by the way, I told you I was an ambassador for them. I don't want to forget that I do have discount codes, and I've posted them below. For the half and the full, you can use the code RUNBLONDE with an E, it's all caps, or RUNBLONDE 5K, 12K for the shorter distances. So that half and full, you can get $10 off and $5 off the shorter events. So I'll put that down below. So if you're listening, you're not sure, and that may push you to get signed up. So save you a few bucks there. Spend it on good running shoes. So one of the other things that I really like about this race is, and I mentioned it before, is they offer a winter running circuit. And the way that they do their circuit, like this Saturday will be the first 5K. You can actually still sign up for that. And that that Blonde Run code gets you a discount on the whole series as well, the run series. So basically, I haven't seen, there I guess are a few other races out there around the country that actually do these kind of a build-up races, but I really love that this race does this super well organized. So again, it's called the Winter Racing Circuit. They have a race at the end of February, always at 5K, and then in March, mid-March, they offer a 10K, and then they do a 10-miler at the end of March, and then beginning of April, they do a half marathon, and then the end of April, they do a 30K. So it builds you up for this particular event. So I really love that they offer that too. So if you really want to, find a way to build up these mileage and not have to be out alone on your longer run, then that is a good way. But I would say too, you have to determine how you want to race that. Do you want to race it at full speed? Do you want to race it at marathon pacing? Especially for that 30K, which is over 18 miles, you may want to do that at marathon pacing, especially if you're fairly new. Pacing is the one thing most people screw up on when it comes to marathoning. They think, oh, I feel so good, and then they push it too hard the first half, and then they end up dying. For a marathon, marathons, in my opinion, don't really start till mile 20. I mean, you get through the beginning, and usually you're going a fairly easy pace, very aerobic. But when you start getting to mile 20 or 18 is when it starts getting really challenging. 22. That's really when all your hard work is going to be tested. And also your mental, have you worked on the mental part of this? And we'll talk about that a little bit more. So it's how long does it take to train? Minimum of 12 weeks if you're an experienced runner, I would say, or maybe even an experienced beginner going to, build up for that. So really the focus to your marathon training needs to be that last 12 weeks. So from now on till May, you need to really be focusing on your training. Now the question is, people ask me, well, how do I train? Obviously, you need to run, and you need miles. There are a lot of training programs you can find online. They're pretty generic, but I would say at least do that. At least have structure from somebody those are usually designed from somebody that has raced one or done some before. They're certainly better online programs than others. And if you can afford a coach, I highly suggest that, because sometimes when you're training, you're tired. You can't see the forest for the trees. You don't understand when you need to take a rest. You don't understand when to push through pain. And a coach can help you with that. Of course, I coach. I do offer group training programs as well as online training. So certainly reach out to me, or I can point you in the right direction in your area. I know a lot of coaches as well. So, everyone is different. So what might work for you might not work for someone else. For me, my first race, I qualified for Boston, my first marathon. And my mileage was at 25 miles a week. Now that's low mileage for a lot of people. But that was what my body did well. I did well at lower mileage, because I was really, I knew exactly what I was doing each workout. And I think everybody is different. Some people need a lot of mileage and they do better with that. So you just, the biggest thing with any of this training is you have to have a plan. A good race is a well-executed plan. So designing a plan, one of my pet peeves, I think, with this marathon training and racing is that people say, I ask them, oh, is your first marathon? Well, what are you aiming for? What's your time? And they're like, oh, just to finish. I think that's an amazing goal. However, I think it's better to figure out what pacing that you want to go. Like, how do you know what pace you should go, how long you're going to be out there, what your nutrition strategy is? You don't even have to be competitive. And, that should be determined by your training. So having a goal, setting things like that, finish goal is always amazing, but it's nice to have a ballpark idea, worst case scenario race time and best case scenario. Then you can gauge yourself on pacing, because if you have no idea, you most likely will go out too fast, and then you're really going to be suffering. And I've seen people not be able to finish races because they've done their nutrition poorly. Now, one thing I want to touch on when it comes to nutrition it's super important, more important than people often understand. You have to practice your nutrition in your training, and particularly in your long runs. Anything over 6 miles, I say, you be taking nutrition. And we'll talk a little bit more about their what they have on the course and how to do your intervals with that stuff. But I did want to talk about training a little bit more. One of the things that I see, mistakes I guess I see, or questions I get about training is this race has quite a bit of decline. And so if you don't train on that, you're not going to be able, your body isn't going to adapt to it well. It is sometimes harder than the uphill. So I think you need to consider that. Yes, it's faster. So there's always, especially if it's faster at the beginning with this race, there's a little bit of that. And then when you get to the half, when you have 13 miles left, you've got quite a bit of decline. And if you push that 10 miles downhill too hard, then you've got some miles left. That's kind of a struggle. So you got to be careful there and know when to bank. We did have somebody ask a question on banking time in the beginning and how do you want to do that. And so we'll be talking about that a little more. But in terms of training, if you find an online program, what you're looking for to make sure it's right for you is there a long run, one, and does it allow you to vary your pacing? A lot of people make the mistake of, you definitely want to build your mileage, but you also want to do other things in your training. You want to vary your pace. You want to make sure you're on different terrain, obviously up and down, doing hills. Even this is downhill, some of the uphill will help build your strength too. So doing uphill work is going to be great. I'm a huge fan of I have an eclectic approach to training, and I am a triathlete. And I'm a big believer, even some of my marathon runners have done better marathon times incorporating cross training. So I'm a big believer in making sure you get some cross training in there. Swimming, that cold water can help your legs recover from a long run. Or cycling can help you work on cadence. And cadence is something that I have a lot of my athletes working on in their workouts too, in training. So definitely make sure that training program has a long run. That's going to be your key. Do not miss it. Now, if you're on a schedule and you miss something, that doesn't mean let's combine it with another workout and make it up. You can't do that. If you miss something in a training with a training plan, just forget about it and move on and stay on schedule. I think that's really important. Unless you're working with a coach like me that can customize and fix something if you were missing something, or if you get hurt or something needs to be adapted, then certainly that can be adapted by someone that knows what they're doing, I would say. So make sure that you've got something that varies, has a long run that works on, maybe you're working on some pacing runs, like a tempo run. Maybe you're doing some speed work in there, some fartlek training, maybe. And another thing I highly encourage, and this is neglected so often, when you do marathon training, you get tired and you often neglect different parts of your training. Obviously, the training is a very important part, but also recovery is just as important. Too many times we don't get enough rest, we're not eating well, we're justifying more calories because we're running so much longer, or we're just tired and we don't want to battle it. We'll just eat whatever, we're so hungry, So being careful with that as well. Another thing that's neglected often is core strength. Doing enough strength training or plyometrics or things like that. You need to keep the muscles strong, the tendons, everything like that. That's going to be, you need to keep it strong. So on my Instagram at The Blonde Runner, I do have a video on core strength. You can certainly message me if you want me to send you that link. But if you're not sure where to get started, it is a basic starter. And I think it's a really good, you should definitely be doing that every other day if you can. Just like with your run training, especially if you're a beginner, even if you're a beginner for a marathon, you're not going to run every single day. You're going to alternate. Now, I like to talk about this a little bit. When you start doing a marathon, you're kind of hardcore, right? You watch other people that do it. Maybe they've been doing it a lot and for a long time. And if you watch their training too hard, sometimes you can get what I like to call Strava envy, where you're watching everything that they're doing and you're trying to mimic it. And you're thinking, oh, I want to do as much as they're doing. But remember, you're getting started, and that can be dangerous, doing more than you should. So if you're a beginner, you don't want to run every single day. You want to alternate, and then you can do cross training on those other days. I'm a big advocate for taking a full recovery rest day a week too, because that's my day to work on the mental stuff that comes with racing. It's my day to give my body a full recovery. That doesn't mean I don't do anything. Sometimes I'll go on a walk, I'll stretch, I'll do compression, I'll massage. Those kind of things are very good for recovery. So yes, the workouts are super important, but what you do on the time between the workouts is also very important. Making sure you're getting off your legs, using the compression socks, those kind of things are going to be very, very beneficial for you. And they're neglected. Too many times we just think about the hard work. But if another thing I want to touch on is injury prevention. Of course, the core strength does that, making sure we have a good training plan that builds up. If you're not sure if you're building up properly, I do have a video on my YouTube talking about the 10% rule. And if you've never heard of that, you'll want to go check that out. My YouTube account is The Blonde Runner, but definitely go over there and check it out. All right, before we move on, we'll go back to some of these things, but I definitely wanted to talk about this Ogden Marathon particularly. So one of the things I always like to do, of course, for my athletes is I train them for particular races. So I love that we're talking about a particular race for this. And this, you could do the same thing for any race that you're training for. Obviously, you want to look at the website. One, you want to make sure that is it a road race? Is it a trail race? This is a road race. So that's going to determine what kind of shoes you're wearing. Obviously, never running in dead shoes is a good thing. And then usually, if it's a good race, they'll actually have an elevation profile. And if you go on the Ogden Marathon, OgdenMarathon.com, you'll see that there is quite a bit of decline on this race. So, starting at 5,200 feet and then going down to, 4,200, you've got some decline there. There's a little tiny bit of uphill here or there, but for the most part, this is a downhill race. So that kind of begs the question of, gosh, how do I pace for this? We had a great question. We've had several questions. The one was a question by Allie from North Carolina. She asked several questions. One is, I've been studying the course. Is this one where you should bank time in the beginning? So let's talk about that. Yes and no. One, and then her other question was, should I shoot for even splits? And I would say, not necessarily even splits, but an even effort. I'm not sure if Allie, if you're listening, if you're using a heart rate monitor, but if you are, that's one way that you can measure that you don't want to overexert. You don't want to have these spikes in your heart rate really soon in the race, because that will bite you later. You don't want that. And sometimes you do bank some time. It is honestly the whole thing. A lot of it is downhill. So you should be able to figure out what should your pace be on a downhill. And if any inclines are in there, the key is keeping that heart rate kind of in a range zone that's safe for you, that's good for you, that's not going to make that heart rate spike. Even when I do my racing and I evaluate even athletes, I make sure that heart rate stays steady, even on the incline. So another thing that we need to think about is how efficiently you're running. So I'm a big believer I do offer running form analysis, so you can see, I can give you feedback on how I do it actually online or in person. But if you're not running as efficiently as you could be, you'll find that if your heart rate will stay the same and you can run a lot more efficient, a lot faster at the same heart rate if you're utilizing all the things that make you a faster runner in terms of efficiency. So, how's your gait? How's your lean? How's, what are your arms doing? What are your, feet doing? Are heel striking? Or a midfoot? All those things are going to be something that makes that baseline, speed that you're trying, that pace, better. So kind of consider that. So I hope that answers your question. If we want to talk about that more, we can certainly do that. Another thing I want to talk about, so definitely looking at the elevation profile. Another thing that helps is also looking at what are they serving on course. So let's talk about nutrition a little bit, and then we'll go into a little bit more on the pacing on that. But again, like I mentioned before, nutrition is super important to practice and training. Now, with this, I always like to go on their website and see, what is this race serving? This race particularly is going to be serving Cliff Gels, Gatorade, water, and fruit. So, and what's great, it's, like I said, a well-organized race. They even tell you the intervals they're going to be serving what. So, you've got aid stations at 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13, 14, 15 and a half, 17, 18 and a half, 20, 21 and a half, 23, 24, 25. And you don't have to memorize that, of course. It's online, so you can see that. The fruit is not available to 7. Cliff shots are available at 5. So one of the tricks that I like to use is obviously training with that product and making sure that you know how your body is going to respond to it. I also like to utilize those intervals on my long run. So if I know I'm going to see an aid station at mile 3, in my training, I'm going to start getting used to taking something at 3. Now, when you race, you might not, I wouldn't recommend, not with this race, you don't need a backpack or anything, unless you have issues and you need to work through that. But if, you should have all the support that you need on course. You shouldn't have to carry anything. But when you're training, you may want to set bottles out at intervals or carry a water backpack or water waist belt or something like that. But do practice with the product. So at mile 5, I would be taking a Cliff Shot. I would actually take that brand and get used to it. There are different flavors, I will say. So maybe if you have a particular flavor you want, bring your own gel. Women, we're lucky. We have a pocket right in our bra. But men, you might have to bring, have shorts that have pockets or whatever. You can certainly bring your own stuff. But definitely practice that nutrition during. And I actually have a YouTube clip on racing nutrition. It talks about Ironman racing nutrition as well. I highly encourage you to listen to that because it's a little longer and we could go into this for like ever. This could be its own podcast and it probably will be in the future. But definitely practice it. Another mistake I see people making is not taking anything at the first aid stations. They wait till like mile 9 or something and it's too late. The nutrition you get at the beginning of the race helps you at the end of the race. I remember pacing one runner on a marathon once, and I talked them through the whole thing. We told them how much water. Sometimes I have, making sure we're eating right before the race, and then we have water during, and then when to have what. So practice that. You might find out what kind of fruit that you. I think bananas are great. Usually people don't have problems with that. Sometimes they'll have oranges and that's not a problem. But you have to just determine what works for you. Okay, I do want to talk about pacing a little bit more. So like I said before, I think it's a great goal to finish, but I think it's better if you can figure out what your marathon pace might be and then work on that and then have, obviously have that goal through your race. And then hey, I'm not pushing it too hard at the beginning. One of the ways that you can determine what your marathon pace should be is, I don't know if you're familiar with Bart Yazzo, but Yazzo 800s are kind of a staple, I think, in marathon training for a lot of runners. It's been around forever, but the way that this works, it's pretty much a classic, is you determine your pace by, maybe set a goal. You're going to have to take a stab at it and just guess. Maybe if you want to do a 3:30 marathon, what you do is you go to the track. After a good warm-up, a good warm-up is a couple laps, stretch it out, do a dynamic stretching. I have a video on that too if you're interested. And then do your 800 at a 3:30 pace with a 400 jog in between. And you want to build up to doing 10 of those, but maybe the first time you do 4. Can you hold a 3:30 for 4 of them with a 1-lap jog? Not walk, but jog between. And if that's hard for you to hold, then you're not going to be able to do a 3:30 marathon. Okay. Once you get up to doing 10 at 3:30, you could hold the 3:30, but choose that whatever interval you want for yourself. Maybe you're striving for a 4:15 marathon. So do a 4-minute, 15-second 800, which is 2 laps and then 1 lap between, and see if you can hold that pace again. Most likely whatever pace that you can hold, anywhere from 6 to 10 of those intervals is the pace that you can hold for a marathon. And, it's been pretty darn accurate. So this is a great way to determine what your marathon pace should be. And honestly, if you look at a lot of training programs, they will do a lot of workouts based off marathon pace or MP. So if you're not sure what that is for you, this is one way to kind of figure it out. And I'm a big advocate for doing speed work in marathon training. And they've seen, as over the years that I've raced, and I've seen that being a change, that has kind of used to be long, build your mileage, that kind of thing, long and slow. It's still valuable, but they're finding that there's a lot, even from the beginning. I have some of my athletes doing speed work. So it helps make you more durable. So that's something to consider. All right, I'll just look at my notes, make sure I'm covering everything. We could certainly cover so many things on this, but obviously making sure you have good shoes that are they're not dead, making sure that if you're prone to blisters that you're using the right kind of socks, and that's a whole new podcast on that. I always highly suggest, especially if you're going into marathon training, if you don't have a GPS watch that will give you your heart rate data and your pacing, I highly suggest starting to use that in training and getting familiar with that. I'm also a big advocate for logging your training. I like to use Training Peaks, and if you're familiar with that or not familiar, they do have an app. It's what I use for training people as well. And they do have a free version and a premium version, but I think that's a great way. It's a kind of electronic log online, and it can analyze that data. It can pair with Garmin Connect and some of these other watches that are out there. So I think that's a good thing. I did want to touch on tapering a little bit, because this is kind of, you'll read a lot of different things with taper. A lot of people like to say, use a 3-week taper. I particularly find people, well, one, when you taper, you're going to find that you get groggy. You kind of feel like, and your body is used to exerting and then feeling those endorphins. But when you're tapering or you're really downsizing your training, you do still want to get the intensity. You don't want to just kind of loaf around and do nothing with your training at all, or just go slow miles. You want to definitely make sure that you're getting those quality miles, but the overall volume goes down. I am a believer in a 10 day to 2-week taper. I find 3 weeks is a little tough for a lot of people. It just really depends on your build, but your volume should definitely go down over that time, but your intensity, some of the quality of your work should go up. You definitely want that, or at least maintain it for sure. One other thing to touch on, good shoes. This could be such a dangerous thing if you do not have good shoes. A lot of beginners tend to make the mistake of getting shoes that fit them exactly. Remember that your shoes will swell. Your feet will swell when you run. Not your shoes, but your feet. And I do have a video clip on this on YouTube that talks about, choosing the right kind of shoes. And you want to make sure that your shoes aren't going to be dead for the race. And you want to make sure that you have time to break them in. So I'd say, a month before the race, are your shoes good? And if you need new shoes, get them so you can break them in before the race. You don't want to have your first run in your shoes be the marathon. You definitely want to break them in. Sometimes it only takes a week or two of walking around and doing some easy runs on them and breaking them in. So during that taper, another thing, I know I'm sort of jumping around, but I just want to make sure we cover everything here. Make sure you're working on things like meditation, and not only during the taper, but throughout your training. Mental strength it comes into play big time, especially those last miles. Another thing that a lot of people like to do, and I like to do this for the last 6 miles in a marathon, I like to dedicate each mile to someone, or someone that has maybe inspired me or given me strength. So I think about that person and I kind of run that mile for them, and it kind of pushes me through. Maybe when I don't want to push as hard as I could, I do, because I'm doing it for more than just me. So I highly encourage that. Another thing that's really great for mental, or obviously breathing and doing visualization, but mantras. If you can have some mantras that you can kind of give yourself a phrase, like I am strong, I am capable, because those negative thoughts will sneak in, like, oh, I can't do this, I'm so tired, and You need to have something that you can come back with. You've kind of got an angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other, right? And which one are you going to listen to? So if you have more words for that angel to say to get you through the race, like I'm strong, I can do this, those kind of things, that's going to help you. I like the mantra, and I even have hats with this on it, is find your strong. I believe everyone is strong, and sometimes we forget it, and sometimes we need to be reminded we can find it. We can find it in ourselves. Everyone is super capable. So another thing that is really beneficial to marathon, especially marathon training, is finding a group, finding camaraderie. I offer training in groups, and there's different running clubs and things like that. It is so valuable to have other people, not only to train with, because they kind of keep you accountable, and they keep you going on days maybe you would want to sleep in because it's cold, or you just you don't want to do it, right? But you having company and chit-chatting, and it can get you through a long run without, it's not as hard, right? So I definitely think that helps a lot. So anyway, there are a lot of racing tips. Another, we could talk about each element for so long, but one thing I find beginners often push it to the last minute to get anywhere. There is a window of time to get to the buses for this race. You definitely want to give yourself enough time to have everything that you need. There is usually a drop bag too, so you can wear some things to the start and have a drop bag that you can throw in the truck or wherever they have it before the race. So usually you're waiting around for a little while before a race begins, but making sure you have, you can get parked, you can get on the buses, you can get where you need to go, and you're not running last minute. Just plan extra time. I'm kind of one of these anal people that's there first, waiting. I'd rather be waiting for the buses to pick me up than getting on the last bus rushing. And I know sometimes things happen, but if you plan ahead, you make sure you have everything, packet pick will be the day before, come say hello, I'll be there somewhere. And, get everything, have everything packed in your bag, ready to go. Don't forget your running shoes. Don't forget your socks, have it all in one place, in one bag. And then go through the scenario in your mind, like how you're going to pace it. What are you going to say to yourself? And you should also, like I said with this training piece, document what you're doing in training, like in terms of what you're wearing. If I'm doing a race and it's in the 40 degrees, I can do a tank top and shorts and I'm fine. Is it going to be sunny? Do I want sunglasses? Do I want a visor? Do I want a hat? Obviously sunscreen, those kind of things. Making sure you're planning every element, and then also having, sometimes there have been cold years in this race. And so planning for inclement weather. Races don't cancel. Hardly ever do races cancel. So runners run in anything. And so that's another reason why in training, if it's a crummy weather day, sometimes go out and push yourself in that really windy, have a windy run, because races happen in any kind of weather. So you really kind of have to prepare yourself for that. And those hard workouts in those crummy conditions can get you stronger for the race. So I think I've covered most everything. If you have questions about marathon training, certainly reach out. I'm happy to give you, point you in the right direction, give you some advice. Marathon is one of those things. I remember finishing my marathon, I think it was back in, 97. It was a long time ago. And it's just such an accomplishment. It's such a feeling. When you say I've done a marathon, that's nothing someone could ever take away from you. And it's something to really be proud of. Most people recognize that as a big accomplishment. So go for it. If you're thinking about a marathon, go for it. If you're not sure how, reach out. Find things. Obviously, there's tons of information on training. Sometimes it's overwhelming. But these are some of the basics that will get you through to the finish. And hopefully you've figured out your pacing and you use some of these things to get you to the finish. But hope you do it. I will be cheering for you. So until next time, live well.